I was about 6 years old when Hurricane Katrina hit, and as you could guess, it completely changed my life. But before we get into my story, hi, I'm Gabrielle. I also go by the Mystic Hottie. I like talking about life, spirituality, healing, and embodied pleasure. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, I would greatly appreciate a like, comment, and even a subscribe. So we're going to get right into my story today. Like I was saying, I was about 6 years old when Hurricane Katrina hit. I was living in Kenner, which is in Jefferson's Parish, which is basically just on the outskirts of New Orleans. And we just say New Orleans for people who don't really know Louisiana like that because it's easier. So I was living there. I remember my cousins came down from Texas, and that was the first time that I had heard about the hurricane. And initially, we were going to stay. We were going to stay because we probably didn't think it was going to be that bad, like a lot of people who didn't think it was going to be that bad and who actually did decide to stay. But my mom made the executive decision that we had to leave. So shout out to her. But yeah, we were packing up our stuff. It was kind of hectic, obviously. It was me, my mom, my older brother, and then my auntie. So none of my family had a car. So someone took us to the first of three shelters that we stayed at. There was three in total. I don't really remember a whole lot about the shelters. I remember sleeping on the floor. I remember one or two of them was a church. Something that I do remember, though, it's just kind of like a side story, but I have to tell y'all because it's funny. So I've never liked peanut butter and jelly, right? I've never liked it in my entire life. And at one of the shelters, all they had to eat was peanut butter and jelly. And I didn't eat. I just straight up didn't eat. But like looking back on it, it's just funny because why was I being so picky during the whole hurricane? It's just crazy. Okay, back to the story. So we stayed at the three different shelters. We had left before like the actual flooding and all of that happened. And someone drove us to Texas, which is, I'm very grateful for that. There was a lot of people along the way who I know helped us. So we evacuated to Texas. I remember when my cousin was telling me about the hurricane, I remember thinking that there was going to be like no lights, no electricity, and that we were going to have to be on top of the roof. So I'm really grateful that we got out before that happened. So blessed that it wasn't worse for me and my family, but at the same time, we did have to evacuate. We were displaced from our home and we did have to move states, right? So now let's zoom out for a second. Because as I got older and I thought about Katrina and I thought about like the hurricane and everything, I realized that it wasn't just this crazy storm, this horrible natural disaster. It was also an example of systematic failure, systematic racism, and systematic oppression because so many people were left stranded. People who were just like me, looked just like me, didn't have a car like my family or the resources to evacuate. And thinking about the conditions that people were left in is just sickening to think about. So many people were filmed suffering in crisis, crying, and a lot of people thought that when they were being filmed and they were like asking for help on the camera, that help was going to be coming like immediate, right? But that wasn't the case. Media and language is huge, and it can really shape how a story is viewed. So during Katrina, they would show a white family say that they're searching for food, right? Show a black family or black people and say that they're looting. It's the exact same thing, but the language is different. And that matters because language can shape the perception of a situation, right? And the perception shapes empathy. Empathy shapes urgency. And I think that's just one of the reasons why there was such a delay in the response when it comes to Katrina. With Hurricane Katrina, I've also just gone through a lot of different emotions. I felt a lot of internalized shame, like because it happened to me, it somehow defined me in a negative way and it somehow made me less than. I don't think that anymore, but that was something that I carried around for a long time. I also have some survivor's guilt because I left early, because I made it out, and a lot of people didn't, and just the conditions that people were left in. I have a lot of anger, sadness, and grief for the injustice that happened during Hurricane Katrina. But honestly, Katrina taught me a lot, and not just the negative things, even though it feels like there's a lot of it. It taught me my resilience, that I really am a survivor, that sometimes the things that we go through that we think define us in a negative way, make us less than, is really a part of our strength, that we can come out the other side strong. And it also taught me that grief and strength can both coexist and one doesn't have to cancel out the other. Lastly, I want to show y'all my rosary because it was given to me during Katrina. I used to keep it in a bag, kind of hidden away, just because the memories that would come up when I would look at it, I guess. Not too much on it because it is missing one of the arms, but that's okay because it's a survivor like me. But yeah, I put it on my altar a few years ago, and I feel like it just represents what I went through, how strong I am, and how protected I really am. Thank y'all so much for watching today's video and listening to my story. I really appreciate it. I would also really appreciate a like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.